Hello and welcome back. You might think right now, what the heck am I seeing? Well, this is a saturation map, and we will be using this in today's episode of the InstaFilter video series. Let me disable the map to see the actual image. Interesting, right? Let's get started. So, what is a saturation map? A saturation map is basically a grayscale version of an image showing how the colors are saturated. Less saturation will be in black and more saturation will be in white. Or, in other words, we convert the saturation value of a pixel to a luminosity value. Let me show what I mean. Here I have a gradient where the colors move between different saturations. If I move my mouse from the left to the right and looking at the info panel, you see that the saturation value changes. If the info panel is not enabled in your setup, you can easily enable it by using the View Studio menu and selecting Info. It might be that in your case the default sampler is set to RGB, but we can change this to HSL to see the saturation values. Coming back to the subject of the saturation map. When we generate a saturation map of this gradient, we would get a black and white gradient, where the most saturated values would be white and the lesser saturated values black. So how do we generate a saturation map? If you search that up, most YouTube videos will tell you to use a selective color adjustment. Let me demonstrate how. We will need to add the selective color adjustment and turn off the relative checkbox. Next, we need to minimize all the black values of the colors. For the black, neutral and the whites, we do the opposite. We need to maximize these. The end result is the saturation map. Let me quickly mask the top part of the adjustment so we can easily compare with the original image. If I move my mouse again from the left, you can see how the luminosity values change according to the original saturation value from the image. The luminosity value determines the amount of white. So the brighter the area, the more saturation was available in the underlaying layer. When I move down to the original colored layer, you notice that the luminosity value from the saturation map is about the same as the saturation value of the color gradient. There's also another way of creating a saturation map, which in my experience is a better saturation map, and it is by using the live procedural texture filter. I have already made a preset of it and I will share the formula in the description. As you see, this creates a very similar result. Let me disable the color gradient so we get the image back. I will turn on the selective color adjustment first and have a look at the saturation map it generates. Now, let's have a look at the saturation map from the procedural texture. It is definitely not the same. Let me also disable this layer so we see the original image and enable a couple of sample points in the info panel. Notice the saturation values: 50, 75 and 100. If I enable the procedural texture layer, the luminosity values are 49, 75 and 100, just as expected. Now let's turn it off and enable the selective color adjustment. Interesting, they are now 47, 28 and 26. So I believe my procedural function does a better job in creating a saturation map. Well, enough theory. Let's get to the fun stuff. How can we use it in a creative way? I will demonstrate two possible methods of using this saturation map in a creative way. First method is using the saturation map itself to blend in with the image using a blend mode. And the second method is to use it as a mask for an adjustment. Let's have a look at the first method. I will create the saturation map by enabling the procedural texture layer. In order to keep our CPU fans steady, I will apply a merge visible by right-clicking on the layers panel. This will create a new layer of what we see on the canvas. I can now disable the procedural texture layer as I have a copy of it. I'm going to use one of the special blend modes in which gray is a neutral color. And in this case, it will be the vivid light blend mode. First, I will fill a layer with 50% gray and make sure it is below our saturation map. Next, I will adjust the blend range of the saturation map to lower it from the bright areas, basically neutralizing the bright areas. I can now group them and set the blend mode of the group to vivid light. The vivid light is a very strong blend mode, so we need to dim it a little bit. I will lower the opacity of the saturation map to around 10–12%, which gives a very nice result. It is actually impressive how nice this turned out. Optionally, as a final step, we could mask the effect out of the eyes by adding a mask to the group and painting with black. Pretty impressive. So, this is one way of using it. Let's have a look at the second method I mentioned. Let me duplicate the saturation map and move it out of the group. Also, let's reset the opacity and the blend range. Now we have our original saturation map again. The idea is to use this as a mask. So I will right click on it in the layers panel and select rasterize to mask. That's creepy. The mask is now being applied to the whole image. But this also gives me an idea I had not planned. What if I put a color fill below the image? Let's try it out. I will first move the mask to the image so it only applies to the image. Now let me add a rectangle and move it below the image. It gives kind of a golden look to the face. So let me adjust the color to a more warmer red-orange color. And there we have it, a golden look for a portrait in 2 steps. I'm guessing this trick will not always work. We got lucky as this image was very suitable for it. But what does work, in most cases, is applying an adjustment and use the saturation map as the mask. Let me demonstrate what I mean. I will add a recolor and let's use blue. If I move the saturation map mask to this adjustment, we get a nice effect. In this case, we changed the light to blue. Again, a bit lucky as the areas where the lights were shining were saturated. But this was not what I was aiming for. I'm going to set the blend mode of this recolor adjustment to soft light. Wow, that looks cool. Let me turn off the saturation map mask and see the difference it makes. It is actually pretty useful to have that mask, to have the recolor blend in a more creative way. Now, normally I would use a blend range to dim down the effect, but it looks like there's a glitch in Affinity. Changes in the blend range have no effect. However, when I turn off the mask, it does. Something goofy happening here. A workaround is just by grouping the recolor and then applying the blend range on the group. We can also apply this to any adjustment. Let me disable this group and add a curves adjustment. I will darken the image by dragging the left control point to the right. A pretty dramatic result. But if I move the mask out of the group to the curves adjustment, we get a nice result. Let me disable the mask to see the result of the mask. Using saturation maps as masks can definitely create interesting end results. Feel free to experiment with it. Before I leave you, let's apply these 2 techniques to some other images and I will share a couple of tricks with you. Here we have a nice portrait. I will apply the first method here, where I use the saturation map itself with a blend mode. So, let me duplicate the image and apply the live procedural texture filter to get the saturation map. I will add a 50% gray fill below and change the blend range of the saturation map. Perfect. Let's group them and set the blend mode to linear light. A bit too much and a bit strange. Not really the effect I was hoping for. Let's quickly fix that. I'm guessing the saturation map is a bit harsh, so I will add a Gaussian blur to it and set the radius between 3 and 4. Much better. The effect is still too strong, so let's decrease the opacity of the saturation map to around 40%. Nice. Looking almost perfect. I feel like I lost the eyes a bit, so I'm going to add a mask to the group and paint with black on it to get the eye color back. Excellent. Have a look at the before and the after. That's quite a difference. I just love saturation maps. Let's continue with the next image. Also a very interesting image by itself, but let's make it more interesting. And in this image I'm going to apply both the methods. Let's start with the first method. You know the drill by now. Duplicate the image, apply the procedural filter to generate the saturation map, adjust the blend range, add 50% gray fill, group, and set the blend mode, and in this case I will use the vivid light blend mode. As with the previous image, the effect is a bit too harsh, so let's add the Gaussian blur to the saturation map. Perfect. Before moving on, let's have a look at the before by disabling this group. And let me enable it again. Quite a difference. To make it even more interesting, I'm going to add the recolor adjustment and select a purplish red. Now we need the mask. I can duplicate it from the group and rasterize it to mask. When I move the mask to the recolor adjustment, we get this amazing end result. The before and the after. As you might have understood by now, the saturation map can be a very useful tool to creatively color grade or adjust your images. Using a saturation map mask, you can target the saturated colors in your image, which gives interesting results, of course, depending on your image. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please hit the like and subscribe button. Thanks very much for watching and keep being creative. Until next time.